Okay, waiting for the gasket sealer to dry on the hoses. I'm going to work on my turn signals. This lever is broken off and I have a replacement. So this just pries out. And then at the top is the plunger for the horn contact and a nut. So I think I just take the nut off now. I had to pull this contactor thing out, which is just slides out. Spring there. And you're supposed to mark the relationship of the steering wheel to the shaft, but I've had the front end all apart and I'm going to have to recenter everything anyway, so I'm just going to pull it off here. I put some WD-40 in there on the spline and that sure loosened it up quickly. There's the ring for the horn. As much as anything, I want this off because I have to work under the dash and it's tired of banging my head on the steering wheel every time I try to get out. Okay, so here we are under the dash. And I think I have this figured out. These guys are lights from the light switch. Big wires are a good clue. So this is from the switch. And this is going into the car harness. I kind of thought I'd see two of these connectors that had two wires to the harness, one for each light, but apparently not. But that's okay, that stuff seems to be working. No, the light's in the way. This guy is the turn signal. So it's the wiper and then for the left and right turn, and those are pretty easy to tell because there's two wires going out to both sides of the car. And then the center one comes from the flasher unit. And so I'm having some trouble there. I think I'm just going to bypass the switch and see what happens as a first test. And then these two must be my, that was the light. Those two yellows must be my overdrive switch. The lone single wire purple must be the horn. So that's just my theory. I haven't done any more than just eliminate wires and by function and number of wires and so on. But that's probably right. And so they go up this tube towards the steering wheel. I'm not quite sure. Those wires are not loose in there. I'm not quite sure how I get that apart. I think I'm going to take out that nut and this nut and see if that releases the pressure on that tube-like thing, and maybe the wires will be loose. Well, this is not fun. So I took out the support that went from here to here. These were double nutted. One of them's bent, and you can see that the nut came off hard because it was bent and dug in. And then I took out the plate that was here, the plate that was on top. It was held that bracket that goes up and back on the top bolt. And that I got this loose now. I don't think I'm doing this right because this is just way too hard. But so I don't know what, it might probably be easier if I took the gauge out, but I start down another rabbit hole with that process too. And then there's this spring-like thing that I think is supposed to tuck in here to hold this somehow. I'm not sure I'm going to even be able to get it back together right. Okay, well, I got to get that turn signal wire out. I finally got a little slack in the wires, and so I can see that I have the colors right on at least these two. And I had to, if I can get this in here, we can see it. I just pulled that tube down a little bit so that I could get the wires loose. Okay, working on the horn deal again. They had this taped together, and thankfully it didn't just cut the wires, they left the lugs in place, which is nice because I think I can just hook up my new non-Triumph relay that I bought for $4. And I had always noticed this extra wire here, and that must be the control for the relay. So I think this is going to work out. I just got to map out the terminals and hook it up right. Got a little tight in there with all the wiring. I had to take the plus 12 in and then jumper it back to the coil of the relay. The horn button grounds the other side, but it works now. I have hornage. I managed to pull the turn signal switch out. It's not easy getting the wires up through that shroud that's underneath there. But I put in the new turn signal switch loosely and tested it, and all my turn signals now work. I did put a new flasher in, but I don't think I probably had to. I think it was just a bad connection. And then I started jumping around. I started on the ignition switch, which had two problems, or potentially two problems. One is when it's in the dash, the whole switch rotates. I tried to tighten it up once and it didn't work, and so I took it out. And the problem is this aluminum shaft has got a D-hole type feature that's supposed to keep it from rotating, but the actual aluminum is worn down so that it rotates in there. I'll take this off, you can see it better. Right in there, it's worn, and so it rotates. I wanted to put it through further so I could have a unmolested piece of aluminum there, but then the cap doesn't go on far enough to clamp it. So I don't really have a good solution to that other than maybe getting a new switch. But the other problem was the starter wouldn't work. If I turned the key, the solenoid wouldn't fire, so I was running the solenoid manually to fire it before. So I traced out the wiring of that. I'm probably going to draw this up a little neater. And then I found the solenoid wire and I ohmed that to the solenoid, and it's good. So I think probably the solenoid's got a bad ground, and so that's coming out next. And just to check, I did take a clip lead from the solenoid trigger to the positive here, and there's no click. So I'm pretty sure that it's got a ground issue. It's not a big surprise that there'd be a ground problem in there. I couldn't get those little nuts and bolts apart. They're just stripping, so I went with the cutting option. I almost got my money's worth out of this cutoff wheel. No matter how much of it you use, though, you still really can't get your money's worth out. They're so expensive. All right, solenoid is out. I didn't even scratch one bit the bracket as I cut the nuts off. Not even sure that that's the stock mounting location. It's kind of the right position, but it seems like it shouldn't poke into the battery. Maybe that's why there's a hole under it. Well, I was right. It's a grounding issue. I ohmed out the coil and it's totally open. So I need a new solenoid. So this is a little scary. This is basically power for the whole car. And it looks like somebody's got wires maybe twisted and taped there. And that goes through the firewall, but the grommet's not even in. And it's so hard I can't get it in anyway. I have to buy a new one, but wouldn't take much for that to short out there. So it was a little better underneath that tape than I thought. They had a splice here, but it was such a small diameter, they just had a few strands of each wire in it. So I've twisted it and soldered it in, and I'll put a wire nut over it for now and tape that down. And I got a grommet in there. I couldn't get it over the lug for the solenoid, but I cut it and was able to get it in with a slit in it. So it's a lot better than it was, and it'll be on the list to fix when I take the body off.